So I want to formally welcome everyone to today's webinar, Driving Down Repeat Contacts. I'm Rachel and I'm going to be your webinar chairperson today. Delighted to welcome our brilliant panel of experts. I'm learning lots, so I'm sure you will too. Welcome back to Peter Massey from Bud. Delighted as always to have you on these webinars, Peter.
Thanks, Rachel. Nice to be here.
And I mean, no introduction necessary, but would you like to just share a bit about your background?
Sure, yeah, been around the industry far too long. So I'm now a bit of a contact center historian as much as a futurologist. I like to try and help people change their minds about the way things work. And I've got sort of 8 tips today I'm going to take you through. Brilliant.
Well, we look forward to that. And also delighted to welcome to his first webinar with us, Lee Cottle from Playvox. Welcome, Lee.
Hi, Rachel, thank you. So, hi, my name is Lee Cottle. I'm Director and General Manager for Playvox in Europe. I've been in the contact center industry about 30 years. So actually really bringing technology from North America into Europe was one of my early things I did. And apart from that, I've been involved in numerous contact center deployments. So I've seen it all from the voice side all the way to conversational AI into where we are today. So it's been a really interesting journey. A lot of consulting as part of that process, and repeat contact, surprisingly or not, comes up a lot.
Brilliant. Well, we look forward to hearing from you shortly. And also delighted to welcome back Joe Hale. We've called you customer service expert. Customer services expert. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, welcome everybody. Yeah, I'm going to focus a lot. I've been a leader in service organisations for 30 years. So I reckon we've probably got over 100 years experience between all of us here. So I think you've got a great session to run, and I'll be focusing very much as a leader and what you can do with your team. So we'll talk later.
Brilliant. We're looking forward to hearing that. So just a bit of housekeeping, a reminder that we are taking a recording of today's webinar, and that will be available later on this afternoon on callcenterhelper.com/recorded-webinars. So today's discussion is going on in our chat room. That's available on cch.chat or callcenterhelper.com/chat. You just need to put in your first name and your email address. It is in a separate window, but hopefully you can put, the webinar screen on one side and the chat room on the other, or even a lot of people run the webinar chat on their mobile phones. A couple of added bonuses of being in the chat room is that you can download a copy of all our speakers' slides. Lots of information there, so I definitely recommend downloading them. And you can also connect with all our speakers on LinkedIn through this link up here. We're also running, as Peter mentioned, our quiz later on, and the buttons to be able to take part are in our chat room. So another advantage of being in our chat room is that we are running our best tip prize. There's a bottle of champagne, box of chocolates, gift card, or charity donation for the best tip. You just need to do #question to ask the panel a question, or #tip to share your top tips for first contact resolution. So before we get into it, I'm going to share a quick poll. So let me launch this one. And the question is, how do you measure first contact resolution? It's multiple choice, so you can select more than one. Repeat calls in a given time frame, contact reasons in CRM system. We ask the customer on the call, post-call survey, speech or text analytics, and we don't measure first contact resolution. Obviously, if there's an other, if you could share it in the chat room, that would be great. Peter, obviously it's a self-selecting webinar. What do you think is going to come out?
Well, you'd kind of hope that sort of speech and text analytics would be top after sort of 5 or 7 years of those technologies been around, but I suspect it's we don't measure will probably win. I'm not sure, but let's see.
Yep, so I'm going to end that poll and share the results. Well, actually 43% coming out saying repeat calls in a given time frame. 34%, yeah, agree, we don't measure first contact resolution. 24% saying contact reasons in CRM system. 13% saying post-call survey. 8% saying we ask the customer on a call, and sadly 7% saying speech text analytics. Surprising results, Peter?
No, not really. As I say, I mean, there's a lot of speech and text analytics out there, but very few people using it in this way. And I'm sure a number of people in the audience around the world will be picking up on that afterwards.
Well, I'm going to stop sharing, and I think it's a great opportunity to hand over to you, Peter. So take us through your presentation.
Okay, will do. Let's see, get the right screen up. Here we go. That's it. Great stuff. Managed to do that without disconnecting myself. So yeah, driving down repeat contact. So let's see. I've got 8 tips I want to go into. So as people who know me and Bud, my business is, we have this passion called how do we stop doing dumb things to our customers and our people. And one of the first lessons on pretty much any subject is that it's not new. You know, so repeat contacts are not new, and I'm going to just use a quick illustration to demonstrate how you can think about repeat contacts when you kick off. So this is a new car, a Kia EV6, what car's car of the year, electric vehicle, and after 42 emails, those are the ones I could count, countless phone calls, I cancelled the order because I'd rented one for 2 months and found it actually isn't ready. Now, the reason it isn't ready is there are a few technical issues, but fairly few, but the company itself is not ready. It's not able to answer questions. It doesn't support its dealers. It's not prepared for the way that launch is going. So the point about it is that if you don't look at what you're going to do with customers, you're going to get repeat calls. Now, if they'd have just thought, actually, this is not so much a car, more a piece of tech. It's a phone app. It's you know, just like a phone. When the iPhone was launched, everybody took forever to get used to it. Then you've got to think about the first 30 days and what people are going to have to climatize to when you're introducing maybe 100 different configurable things on the car and 8 different modes of driving it and so on and so forth. Everybody's got to get used to it, whilst at the same time setting a promise of how many miles it'll do and all this kind of thing. So in the first 30 days and the first billing cycle, the tech industry and the phone industry, you know, worked out they had to look at contact rates and repeat rates differently. But the biggest lessons they learned were the knowledge base has to be ready before launch, because that supports the dealer, the customer, and everybody else in between. You've got to monitor the forums and look at what people are talking about, because that'll tell you the frequently asked questions and it'll stop you getting into the loop. And you've got, as the picture shows here, it's an EE one, you've got to listen to your advisors who are chatting or talking to customers and know what the issues are. And you've got to do that in real time, because otherwise you're going to get that flipping turtle that I became. And the net result is I lose confidence completely in the company and I cancel the order and go buy something else. And interestingly, having bought a little BMW, they had a BMW genius take me around the car and set the car up when they delivered it. And that's copied straight from Apple. T-Mobile in the States copied that same idea straight from Apple. So my first point is none of this is new. Go copy what other people do. My second point is that repeat contact shouldn't be looked at in isolation of contact itself. It's part of the wider subject of contact elimination. And although it can feel a bit messy to start off with, if you're doing contact elimination programs well, you'll find it's not so difficult after all. Now, I mentioned there, the best service is no service, the book my colleagues wrote. The first point of the best service is no service is to understand the contact. So this is just any contact that you're getting. This is an example here of contact reasons, or some people call them customer intents. My handset's not working, or I cancel my contract, I can't access a browser, or whatever it may be. If you've categorized clearly and ideally in verbatims, then you can say which of these contact reasons is causing the repeat calls. So in this example here, they've selected out what drove customers to call 5 or more times. You can start to prioritize. And in fact, prioritizing what to hit in your repeat calls should take into account the basic contact reasons, their effect on NPS or customer satisfaction, cost revenue, and you prioritize whether repeat calls are the biggest deal or whether something else is, but it's part of that prioritization process. So that's the second point around making it part of contact elimination overall. And the third point is that first contact resolution is often talked about as the target, the aim. We talk about zero contact being the aim, hence the best service is no service. I, a customer, don't want to have to call you, to contact you, etc., etc. I want the perfect journey, the green box at the top. And if you've got the right analytics set up, you can check why are people falling out of the perfect journey. And the objective is to avoid getting down those stairs into the contact areas where I've got to seek help either from your tools or from your assisted service, or where I get stuck or I start flipping, like the Kia example. And it's an important point here that for me, my first contact is probably with your help page. That to me is a contact. To you, you may measure it as your first contact when you get assisted service. But I think it's really, really important when you start any of these kind of repeat contact programs to look at the whole staircase there and work out what the perfect journey is and why there would be zero contact, and then start looking for the customer's first contacts as much as you look at your first contacts in that way. So that's point 3. 5 more tips then for looking at repeat calls. So these are ways of thinking about repeat calls when you're putting your program together or you're working in a program, looking at repeat calls. The first thing is, what kind of repeat calls have you got? If you look at person versus need, quite often what you've got are these categories. So on the top left, different person, same need. So that's a repeat contact type as opposed to a repeat caller. On the bottom right, you've got the same person, different need. You've got a person who doesn't feel very capable or who is struggling, who is that flipping turtle, if you like. And in the bottom left, you've got the same person with the same needs, somebody who can't get resolution to a particular problem. And I think the emotion and the importance of these different types can be quite illustrative when you start to examine your repeat calls. The next thing I would look at is the motivations that drive the repeat calls. So these will vary across time, or according to what a person is doing. But these 4: lack of knowledge, how do I do something? How does it work? How did it, etc., etc. A lack of knowledge. Why can't I get that in your FAQs? Why can't I get that on your knowledge base? Why is it not there in that way? Okay, lack of confidence. So that might be, first of all, that I, a customer, have a lack of confidence in the agent who gave me the answers because they ummed and ahed or whatever it might be. Or it could be the other way around. I just don't feel confident with the thing I have bought or I'm using. And I need it to be instilled with some confidence. I need to be educated in that way. The other 2 at the bottom, novelty and reassurance. We've talked about novelty, the first 30 days and the way that works. And then reassurance. Some things are always going to require some reassurance. If it's the tax year end and you're putting a payment through or taking a payment out and you want to know it's gone through, you're highly likely to ring until you find out with some certainty and some confidence that something's gone through. So those, I think, are the 4 main motivations, but there's a couple down the bottom there not to forget. Boredom or fandom. Crazy fans ring up a lot because they're really keen on the organization, or bored people sometimes ring up for a chat. That can occur. And lastly, when you're doing your measurement, look out for mobile phone signals. Of course, you can measure 3 calls, which is actually 1 call where the mobile phone signal broke a couple of times. So it's important to look at that as well. Okay, so the next thought to bring into your program is this concept of snowballs. This is another Amazon one, like flipping turtles. If you imagine pushing a small snowball through the snow, rolling it downhill, it gathers snow as it goes and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the equivalent of what happens to repeat calls. As I get to the 2nd call, the 3rd call, the 4th call, the 5th call, things are getting worse for me. I'm getting more frustrated. The problem's getting bigger. I'm more likely to cancel things. So there's an important thing to bring to your teams about spotting snowballs and melting snowballs, and then looking back at who created it and trying to prevent that happening in the future. And in the topic of measurement, it's a very interesting ratio to have the ratio of snowballs melted to created. And you can do that if you've got different site vendors, or you've got different sites of your own, or you've got different teams. You can look at that ratio of how many snowballs do they melt and how many do they create. And it's a very powerful way of focusing people on dealing with repeat calls. Then second to last, your operational model can drive repeat calls. We have this concept called rocks and pebbles. So if I just take you through, first of all, the first bullet point, technology or human triage. So who do I contact when I'm getting assistance first? Do I get the machine or do I get the person? Fine, doesn't matter. Do I stay with that person who's a universal agent, can deal with everything? Or do I get handed off to a specialized group? Now that's all part of the design of your operating model. But quite often what we find is that the specialized groups are specialized by product or segment, high value customers or mortgage applications, it might be particular things. What we found works exceptionally well is if you specialize by complexity split, the rock and the pebble. So if I keep all of the pebbles with the triaging person up front, I have to define what's a pebble that first person can answer. And I give the rocks to specialists who can deal with the complexity. And that split can increase confidence in the advisors and confidence in the customers enormously. And the difference between a pebble and a rock is defined by the quality of your knowledge base. If you've got a really good knowledge base and you've trained people to use it, then you can have quite complicated things handled by the universal agent model. That gives you extra capacity in your model. And if you don't have that knowledge base defined, you're going to have nearly everything go through to trained specialists that take 6-9 months to specialize. And your repeat calls will reflect that model in that way. Okay, so final couple of slides. This last point, I'm not going to go into any detail, but quite a lot of companies I go into don't have what I call optimization teams. They don't have people who have the time to look at this stuff, work out what's going on, and then start driving programs to eradicate those contacts or those repeat contacts in that way. Quite a lot of people, as we saw early on, are not using speech analytics to do this kind of stuff. You can program your speech analytics or your text analytics on chat to pick up the words that people use when they're repeat calling, and you can flag that up very quickly. And your analytics can then be used to build the data that allows you to set the right priorities. And to repeat, you're using that to try and improve the first point of contact, be it the product, inside the product, or in the app, or in the website they go to for help. You're trying to improve all that stuff. Don't just try and improve the contact itself. Okay, so that's all I want to say. All of this stuff is coming out. In the Best Service No Service was written in 2000. Well, it launched in 2008. It's been around a long time now as an Amazon bestseller. Bill and David, my colleagues who wrote that book, have just done their book 3, as we call it internally. They're called The Frictionless Organization. Funnily enough, it's got a lot of what's in the Best Services No Service, but it's much more a handbook. It takes you to a lot more detail how to do this stuff yourself. So you can pre-order that on Amazon now, and I'll tell you quite a lot about in the whole topic of contact elimination and repeat calls and analytics as well. Okay, so that's all I want to cover. Rachel, I'm going to pass back to you.
Brilliant. I'm going to share my screen. Well, thank you so much for that. Maybe if everyone in the audience could write in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about Peter's presentation? I mean, Peter, brilliant as always. Hard to pick out my key takeaways, but I've written a few down of, repeat contact is part of a wider contact elimination. Don't just look at it in isolation. Zero contact is the aim. Where's your customer's first contact versus what your first contact is? And, my favorite one, spot the snowballs and melt the snowball. A really interesting way of, resolving those issues. So thank you so much for that. We've had a few tips come in, so I'm going to share those. Becky said, we really try to make sure we train our staff to understand the customer viewpoint. We ask them to put themselves in our customer's shoes to think about what pain points we can avoid by better, I'm going with being better in that first interaction. Jo, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about that, aren't I, a bit later? But yeah, if you can, get them to walk through it, but not just the journey that they do, the whole journey. So the customer journey from end to end. So if they start, obviously you wouldn't want to have all of this, but if they started on a web chat and ended up on a phone, seeing that journey the whole way through is really, really important, because from an agent perspective, if they can really understand where their customers come from, they have a better chance of dealing with it and resolving it for them.
Yeah, thank you. Rebecca said, we're going to start educating on the intent to understand the customer and not just the intent to reply. So we understand the life event of why the customer called and not just the reason. Lee, you're nodding with that one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is absolutely crucial, because understanding why customers are likely to call by using some predictive knowledge helps you be able to prepare when they do contact, or indeed be proactive and be able to respond prior to that. So, and I think this is something that's happening more and more now, particularly with complex products that people buy, like the car, for example.
Yeah, and Peter, I mean, you were very much talking about the why the customers called. Well, I'd written down the different need versus different person sort of thing, or same person and everything. I think it's very important to understand that why.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're going to go forward then and fix things, if you look through these different tips and gone, right, okay, we understand that, you've got a lot more chance of getting some traction with your colleagues. At the end of the day, when we go back to where we started about what are all the different reasons that cause repeat calls, it's not usually the agent. It can be, but it's not always. And consequently, you're going to need colleagues in different departments to help you. So it's important to be able to explain what's happening and show the data in context, not in isolation.
Yeah. So Phil sent in a tip saying, set up a safe environment to perform tests and learn from your people to make rapid, measurable procedural impacts to understand the change in repeats per experiment. Whew, crikey, that was lots of words. Katie said, we find that sending a survey out to customers periodically allows us to iron out any issues, and we also send out surveys for those who've recently contacted us to try and categorize them into query subject to assess frequency. Jo, what are your thoughts on kind of, surveys and things?
I think it's relevant when the customer really wants to have an answer. So what I mean by that is there's things like, for example, you may have something that's gone wrong with a new product being launched. So you'll have a lot of feedback at one point, so it'll help you with that. I think it's important to try and categorize them so that you can work from the biggest thing, but also remember that you can't always fix that big thing. So from a perspective of trying to look at it across things, think about also what you can actually influence to fix. So some of those little things that customers want might make a really big difference to them, and you can do them yourself rather than waiting for a project or a program.
Yeah. Well, we've got a few more tips, or lots coming in now, but I'm going to we'll come back to those. I'm going to share another poll, and let me put this one up, which is, what percentage of contact volumes are repeat contacts in your contact center? Is it 0 to 4%, 5 to 9%, 10 to 24%, 25 to 49%, or 50% of contact volumes, or don't know? Lee, what sort of things do you think are going to come out?
Oh, this is an interesting one. I think that the percentage of repeat contacts, I don't think anybody really knows the right answer. This is my first point I'd like to say, but I should imagine it's going to come back at 10, 24%.
Yeah, I think you've actually seen my screen, because yes, 43% of people agree that they don't know, and 24% of people saying 10 to 24%. 15, 5 to 9, 10, 25 to 49%, 7% of people 50% of contact volume, and 1% saying 0 to 4%. So no, interesting to see. So Lee, I think it's a perfect opportunity for you to take us through your presentation.
Great. Okay, hopefully
Brilliant.
you can see that. Brilliant.
I can, yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Rachel. So I'm going to touch on 3 subjects today: reasons for repeat contact, 4 categories for repeat contact, which is really helpful to kind of put your brain around how you bucket them. And then the last one is how empowering your agents can make a significant impact to reducing and driving down repeat contact. And then I'll summarize that. The repeat contact has become an increasingly more complicated when you consider all the different channels now that are available to customers to contact the contact center, whether that's chat, text, email, and phones. And one of the biggest challenges is how you join up all those customer journeys together. Where did the contact originate from, and where did it get traversed to, and where was it ultimately progressed to get resolved? The result is an awful lot of data, but I think a few organizations fully understand the reason behind repeat contact, which of course makes it harder to eliminate in the first place. So the reasons for repeat contact are many and will be varied greatly around the industry sector that you happen to work in. A process failure, for example, on the website results in an awful lot of repeat contact. Talking from experience, only last week I was trying to pay for our virtual office from Regus online, and I got this unhelpful internal server error. I'm sure people are familiar with these problems before. So I was unable to pay my invoice, so I exited out of the site, and then a few moments later I got an email saying, please go to the website and make your payment. So I went back to the website again, same internal server error. Sounds familiar to everybody? I then thought, well, there's only one thing I can do. I took a screenshot of the screen and I sent an email back to Regus along with, hey, I'd love to settle this invoice, but I keep getting this internal server error. I got yet another email, and then 40 minutes later or so, I had a telephone conversation where they actually called me and we settled the account. Now that's a great example of a process error, and I'm sure, like I say, everyone's experienced it. But could it have been avoided? Is the first question that we ask ourselves. And in the ideal world, absolutely. But in reality, it doesn't happen because we don't live in a perfect world. The other reasons for repeat contact include misinformation or poor product knowledge, which could be improved through training. On the self-service side, it could be you're using conversational AI or IVR, and you're not matching the intent with the contact, and therefore routing it to the best process or the best person to be able to deal with that problem, resulting in ultimately an abandoned call and a reattempt to contact the organization. Not being able to resolve an issue because you need help from another department is another common reason for repeat contact, resulting in a transferred case or a call. And is the repeat contact due to a specific agent or training required? One of the ones that I love that comes up a lot is, are we using the right channel to solve the problem in the first place? There's so many channels, but which are the right medium to use to solve the problem? And then, do you have an unexpected high volume of traffic? Do you have enough resources to be able to handle those contacts? You don't get abandoned calls and coming back in, or abandoned tickets. Perhaps you don't have a workforce management that's accurately scheduling staff to be able to handle those peaks and troughs. The reasons for repeat contact are long and wide. But if it comes back to what's the most important aspect of good customer service, and that is around getting your issue resolved on the first moment of contact, first call resolution. And this is a chart going back from Microsoft back in 2020. And this survey is still true today, because that's exactly what us as customers want. We want to get our problem solved immediately at that first contact. And here's the interesting thing, no matter the length of time it takes. So we've got 4 categories for repeat contact here. And this is broadly where you can put these problems. Start with customer behavior. This could be a generational thing for sure. The silent generation, the baby boomers that really are reluctant to use self-service. really want to use the telephone. It could be Generation X or the millennials, or even Generation Zs who prefer digital channels or a combination of channels to solve their problem. If you're Generation X like myself, I will use every possible means to get my problem solved. I might be a repeat call, several cases opened. I'm your worst nightmare. But that's because I'm impatient and I want to get things done quickly. Likewise, agent skills. This could be down to poor onboarding, lack of training, inconsistent coaching, or unfriendly IT systems, hard to use knowledge bases, and just a lack of supervisory support. It could be missing here. Or perhaps, and this is an interesting thing to think about, perhaps the agent can solve the customer issue and is simply not powered to do so. Two other areas, resources and routing. Do we have enough resources scheduled to be able to handle those peak loads? Have we understood the intent properly for the reason for the contact and the reason why they last contacted? Do some help to predictive of what they could need. And then routing to the best services to solve the problem, whether that be an automated service or in fact a human. And then lastly, you've got this process technology gaps. Where there's areas of improvement. For example, does the mobile app work well? Is it nice and does it got a nice user interface? Is your website easy to navigate? Have you implemented a QA system to be able to get some granular information around what the customer likes and what the customer doesn't like? How we can improve that interaction? And likewise, have you been able to, look at how you schedule your staff to be able to handle those volumes so you don't get the abandoned calls? They use workforce management. So you can really schedule the right number of the resources to handle your peaks and troughs. So they're the four categories of repeat contact. But our businesses, all of our businesses are built on conversations, whether they're chats, emails, telephone calls, they are all conversations. And the average agent has more conversations with your customers in a day than your entire executive team has in a year. Now that's a very powerful thought, which leads me nicely to agent empowerment. Agent empowerment is based on a lot of things, typically starting with knowledge, through learning, through timely interventions, for the quality review process, access to good tools, CRM, databases, knowledge bases. But really the key thing is about fostering a culture of independence by providing coaching and advice that will enable agents to make decisions based upon their experience or common sense. This really requires a cultural change that encourages independence rather than always having manager or supervisory approval, and is based on trust. Being trust also means you need to be transparent about the metrics, the KPIs that the agent has control over, whether that's first call resolution, their CSAT, their attitude, attendance, adherence and availability, the quality of their work, and individual feedback, ideally provided in the moment in real time. Understanding customer needs is clearly important. So using customer insights to understand the root cause of why the customer contacts you, the reason for the most contact, and the reason for the return contact is also crucial. And likewise, all of these things together is around taking the feedback from the agent directly. Real life agent feedback enables you to improve customer journeys, processes, makes agents empowered to make change. Even simple things like going through internal scorecards of an interaction and how you can improve that, to even asking the simplest of questions: what causes the most customer feedback, whether that's negative or positive, can really help you plan and look at where those repeat contacts are coming from. This was quite interesting. I thought this is a great example of power of empowerment, and it comes from the Ritz-Carlton Group, a hotel chain very similar to Premier Inn here in the UK, well, kind of, sort of. But in this example, every member of the Ritz-Carlton team is empowered to spend up to $2,000 per guest per incident to solve a customer problem. Interestingly, and the reality is, it's not about the amount, it's the fact that you show trust in your employees. And when you show trust in your employees, you do the right thing. They can move mountains. And this helps foster that independence that I was just talking about. Having trust in your team to do the right thing will ultimately drive down repeat contact. Empowering your agents will make your organisation more efficient and customer focused, and help ultimately drive down first contact resolution, which is the ultimate game. So I've got sort of 10 takeaways here that I kind of put up on the screen. I'm not quite sure how I'm doing for time, Rachel, but I'm happy that I can take questions.
A quick whistle stop tour, I'm sure, Lee.
Okay, wonderful. So I think the key takeaways here are make empowering your agents your top priority, and that's the absolute key thing here. And making the empowering agents is around providing the tools, the process, the training, the support, the ongoing encouragement. Selecting agents that reflect the culture of your business is absolutely crucial. The training, the coaching, the CRM, the knowledge-based systems, the community systems are also really important, particularly when you're remote working. You want to make sure people feel part of the wider audience, so they can collaborate together. Supervisors and managers and team leaders shift their focus to coaching and advising, and really start to foster that really important control back to the agents, so they can really take control of the customer situations that they have. Identify customers' most common reasons for contacting you, and there are a whole bunch of tools that you can use to do that, but start asking inward when you start talking to the agents themselves that are dealing with that. Listen to them, brainstorm the repeat contact situations. What can we do to change process somewhere? And if your service relies on subject matter experts, let's find a way to give them immediate access to them, rather than trying to transfer or putting them in another queue, which is another reason why customers abandon their interactions. And be open to making changes. Allow issues to be solved on first contact where you can. The other thing here is on 9 is make sure that the goals you create and incent don't compete with each other. And this is quite important. If you think about average handle time, which is great metric for looking at how efficient you're handling with an interaction, and how many more interactions you can have with the agent. The bigger thing to ask yourself is, well, that competes with trying to resolve the problem in the first place, and each customer is very, very different. So maybe that's not always the right metric. And use your Net Promoter Score and customer experience survey data, and find other sources of data to really support the changes that you need to give that first contact resolution.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Lee. I'm just going to share a quick poll and find out if you would like to hear more about the Playvox solutions. Please just click this poll now. Lee, brilliant presentation. You know, I really enjoyed, well, I'm always a big fan of stats. So it said 33% of people said getting issues resolved in a single interaction, no matter the time, was the most important aspect of good customer experience. Your business is built on conversations. You know, the bit about average agents have more conversations in a day than your entire exec team has in a year. So, you know, use that knowledge. And, you know, the 4 categories for repeat contacts. Can empowering agents help this, or is it a process failure or website and the contact center is not aligned? You know, brilliant insight. Thank you so much for that. So we're coming across to our quiz now. So you do need to be in our chat room to take part. That's so just log in callcenterhelper.com/chat, or just type in cch.chat into your browser. The quiz buttons can be found in the bottom left-hand corner. To vote, you know, if you think the answer is C, you just click the button that correlates in the chat room. So I'm going to tab across and find the thing. So we've got about half our audience at the moment in the chat room. So log in callcenterhelper.com/chat. Last chance. I'm going to put up the first question. Oh, I've got my quiz right in the way. So what is the biggest reason for repeat calls? Is it A, website and contact center not joined up? B, other departments need to be involved? C, a process failure? Or D, an agent giving out wrong information? What is the biggest reason for repeat calls? Is it A, the website and contact center not joined up? B, other departments needing to be involved? C, a process failure, or D, an agent giving out the wrong information? Last chance to vote. Yeah, most people getting that one right. It was C, a process failure. That was according to our poll. 68% of industry professionals think that process failure is the main reason for repeat customer calls coming into the contact centre. Mark is currently in the lead. So which of the following FCR practices is not a great idea? Is it A, determining repeat contact drivers, B, fixing broken processes, C, measuring FCR in isolation, or D, setting realistic customer expectations? Which of the following FCR practices is not a great idea? A, B, C, or D? And yep, made it too easy this week. C, measuring FCR in isolation. If you have high FCR rates, that is often because many queries are easy to answer, yet will your customers be happier having to phone in instead of using self-service? Probably not. So measure FCR in tandem with other metrics to gain more insights. Mark still swiftly in the lead. So according to our survey, which do customers value the most? Is it A, efficiency, B, first contact resolution, C, knowledgeable advisors, or D, timely responses? So that's according to our survey, which do customers value the most? A, efficiency, B, first contact resolution, C, knowledgeable advisors, or D, timely responses? And a bit mixed. We thought we'd throw this one in. It's actually C, knowledgeable advisors. Although all are important, knowledgeable advisors came out on top in our 2021 What is Contact Centres Doing Right Now survey report. And final question, who said every contact we have with a customer influences whether or not they'll come back? We have to be great every time or we'll lose them. Was it A, Maya Angelou, B, Kevin Sturz, C, Jeff Bezos, or D, Annette Franz? Who said every contact we have with a customer influences whether or not they'll come back? We have to be great every time or we'll lose them. Actually, most people getting that one wrong. It was Kevin Sturz. Another good quote by him is, know what your customers want most and what your company does best. Focus on where these two meet. And the winner up, leading from the very beginning, congratulations, Mark, 113. We'll be in touch after the webinar with your prize. So I'm going to tab back to this and get Jo to take us through your presentation.
Fab. Let's just share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to focus a little bit. We've talked a lot about projects, and in your organization you've probably got projects, automation, changes, customer journey teams that are working on customer experience, customer service within your business. But I want to really focus on what you can do day to day with your team. So not just, doesn't matter what level you are within the organization, what role you're in, each of you can actually influence repeat calls and the experience that you give, and can work towards improving your results. So firstly, why engage your team? So they're closest to the customer. Lee talked about that. They know the pain the customer feels because they probably hear it or see it. And empowering your teams and engaging your teams is one of the biggest trends that you can have to make service better. So everybody knows that if you engage and empower your team, service gets better because they feel more part of it. So I suppose the first thing is, how often are you engaging your team? How often do you talk about it? How often are you sharing positive feedback? Do you talk about best practice? And do you engage others in the business? And one thing that's really interesting I've tried is, have you actually just run a podcast or kept a blog of the sessions that you're running with your team? Because not everybody's in it all the time, so that you're keeping everybody up to date on that sort of information. So we talk a lot when we're in teams about silos, don't we? So, you know, within organizations, you can break down these silos by getting people to come to your team meeting. So a great session that I've run before is a metric session. So having somebody from the finance or the insight team in this case, sharing the data from a service perspective with that the board see. So actually taking that data, looking at it and comparing what my team saw on a day-to-day basis, and luckily finding that a lot of those metrics were the same. Obviously they were at a higher level, but they were the same metrics. They were looking at Net Promoter Score, FCR, they were looking at CSAT, all of those things, and even things like compliance. They were looking at those things, and it's actually really helpful from an agent perspective to see what the board look at, and it's helpful for you. You can also, senior leaders really like to come to sessions, get them to come to your session, your team meeting, and get them to share a little bit more about what they think is driving the customer strategy. Get your complaints team to come, what's the most common complaints within your team, and have a discussion about that. Other things that you can run in your session is customer playback. You know, I've actually taken calls to the board and played those calls from customers there. That's really helpful. Another session that I've run is map an end-to-end journey of get one of your customer journey team to come in and map that journey, and then get your team to actually walk through the journey that they play in it and highlight any differences and have a discussion about those differences. And are those differences against the reality, against what we think the journey is there something we can do about those differences? Can we improve it? Is there something we can do? The other thing we talked a little bit about earlier, getting them to walk in customers' shoes. Actually phone your own centre and deal with that, but also phone your competitors. What is it that they're doing that we could actually learn from? And even you could run a session that Peter's talked about the snowball. All of these things will start to engage your team in what it is about customer service. Very often you'll have metric sessions that you'll have, and every call centre has metrics. But do your team really understand what those metrics mean and why we use them? So, you know, get somebody from the insight team to come and talk about the metrics. Why are they there? Why do we use them? You know, is AHT the thing that's causing the issue, or are we using it for a specific reason? A lot of the time we're actually using it from a budgeting perspective, but we always look at it as a reduced time. So actually explaining that is a really great idea to do. During these sessions, really think about encouraging debate. So engagement comes from debate and understanding. So things like, what makes service hard work? How do you make sure you deliver the customer's expectations? Ask questions and listen. Encourage the team also to coach each other. So as part of a team meeting, you could play a call and they could listen to it, and you could coach what's the answers to the questions some of the team would say, and have a coach and debate session about that. But remember to focus on the positives and improvements, and always pushing forward and only looking back when you're wanting to learn. So keep that as a positive intent rather than thinking about what you've done wrong. Think about what you've learned and what you can then put in place for the future. And there isn't any wrong or right answer. People deal with service in a different way. It will mean different things to lots of different people, but getting a combined approach will help you with your teams to make sure they're delivering the same things. And then also there's things like, at the end of the session, gone one too far, create a little plan. So by brains, I mean a plan. There will be hundreds of things you and your team think you can do, but actually focus on something that they can physically do today, straight away, and measure that to be successful. So there doesn't have to be loads of things you can do. You can have a big list and say, well, we're going to start with this one. But be very specific about what it is you want them to do and what you've agreed as a team you're going to do, so that each other can hold each other to account. Support the team to take ownership. Make sure they're, you know, if they can help them to resolve a customer, if they can resolve it, encourage them to do that and support them when they do that, to make sure that they feel empowered to do it. And then the final things I think are the main tips of success are really, you know, Give clarity to your teams of their role and the role that they play. Make sure they understand what they are part of and what their role and how important it is. Engage the team in the business and sharing the perspective. So what's the bigger strategy that you have and how can we engage them? And what does that mean for me is critical for them. Make sure they really understand the metrics and explain that why to them and why it's part of that and what that means, and support them about making decisions and actions and push forward. But really daily, it's about engaging, supporting and celebrating the wins that you'll have. And that way, hopefully what it'll do, it'll keep it simple, very specific, and little things that you can do every day can make a big difference to the service you deliver. And that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jo. Yeah, if you could write in the chat room in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about Jo's presentation? Jo, a brilliant insight into it. You know, a kind of how often do you discuss FCR customer metrics in your team? You know, how do they match up with board metrics? You know, great takeaway. You know, encourage debate and ownership and discuss what makes service hard work. You know, what one thing could we change that would make a difference? And yet finally, engage, support and celebrate your team daily, a really important part of, you know, of that journey. So thank you very much for that, Jo. Yeah, we've had lots of top tips coming in, as you can see, so I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. Trudy said, to be able to understand the customers, you need to ask the correct questions. It can be too easy to assume you know why the customer is calling. Peter, what are your thoughts on, you know, this one?
Yeah, it can be a tricky one because actually, as you get further into the contact, you can lose track of what was going on. So what we advocate is think about the words the customer uses when they first talk to you and use that. And quite often customers will have 2 reasons contacting you. So you can't always accommodate that in your analytics or in your in the coding that you ask an agent to do. So my thought is just think exactly what words verbatim did the customer use and use that as their intent.
Brilliant. So Martin sent in a tip saying, using a quality model, checking the quality of the call/contact helps to quantify the value irritant matrix data if used alongside. Any contact logging using the same data labels and capturing call times, it helps to over time show how this impacts the operation and what benefits a change has made. Leo, I don't know whether this is something technology could help with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really good point here. So when you do go through your quality checks, making sure you're actually asking the right questions when you do the review, you know, everything from the opening salutation through to how you're progressing through solving that particular issue. That's really important. And often that means looking back over your scorecard and say, actually, we should introduce this new question. I think the other piece out of this is when you do go through that process as a quality assurance executive, you want to then turn around and say, actually, these are areas of coaching that's required, and actually deliver that out as well. So it's not it's two-way. Here's the input we had from that interaction. We probably didn't know the best way to deal with it, but now we do through coaching and further education. So, and technology can help.
Brilliant. Robert said, have scheduled trend reviews with the SMEs to help identify the repeat calls and subjects to prioritize, then use a simple project management tool to track all the actions which come out of these in terms of knowledge-based actions or wider issues to address in the business. Massey said, we have implemented tags for our agent calls to determine what our customers call about, to promote specific training areas to help educate our agents to have first call resolution. Sarah said, coach on communication techniques to recognise opportunities for changing comms channels to better understand and deliver great experiences. Jo, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think if you can, coaching, as it always is my bag, I quite like a bit of coaching. Coaching is really important, but being very specific about it. So what words and phrases that the team can use to recognise what will help with the customer. I think that's quite important. And different people will use different languages and different words that mean things. So it's getting that understanding is critical. And it will help you to use in your training, again, when new starters come in. So capturing it's really important.
Brilliant. And learning from it, I'm guessing, you know.
Yeah.
So Thomas said, hold regular collaboration sessions between agents and leadership teams. Use this time to review previous contacts and share best practices, session improvements. Yeah, Joe, I mean,
yeah,
read your presentation as well. So Rachael said, instead of offering a callback, have a process in place to transfer certain callers directly to a manager if the agent cannot assist to customer satisfaction on first call. Lee, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, my gut reaction, yes, that would be great in an ideal world, but I don't think that necessarily always works. I think it goes back to this empowerment I was talking about earlier. And you can empower people by going through the quality review process, give them the coaching education to do so. Otherwise, you could have a landslide of calls going to your manager or your supervisor, which just doesn't work. So, I think there's a balance between that.
Yeah, and Peter, I mean, you know, otherwise everyone's going to be asking for the manager, I think.
Well, it goes back to those points that were in the surveys. You know, people want the resolution. If they haven't got the resolution, why not? You know, is it the lack of confidence in an agent? Is it the lack of knowledge that was there? So if you've got your knowledge base really tuned up, then there's no reason why the agent would be lacking any confidence and not giving the resolution. So I think, whereas this is a sticking plaster, if you like, it would be better to go back to those root causes and fix them in the first place. But if you are going to do this, then one of the tips you can do is stick a mobile phone number onto your onto the managers or the escalated person. It could be that somebody else in your team, if you work in self-managed teams, for example, where there is no team leader, then it could be anybody else in the team. And as long as you've got the ability to communicate what has happened and what the customer's problem is, another member of the team might be able to reassure somebody. But it takes a little bit of thinking through if you're going to implement this.
Yeah, and Joe, I mean, obviously this comes down to coaching as well, you know, making sure that actually afterwards that kind of knowledge is implemented.
Yeah, I think it's you could do this as you could have a manager there. You know, my perspective would be I would limit that, because I think the manager could have a bigger impact by being out on the floor with the team, hearing that. It's amazing if you just stand in the middle of a call center, and a lot of you will have done that, and you can hear so many things going on where you can give support. So it's probably thinking about how you can do that, but also learning and running some of those sessions that I talked about. You know, if you're having particular process that's quite difficult and you are getting a lot of feedback to the manager about it, as a manager, my first thought would be to run a team meeting session that talks just about that process and how we can resolve it. So if you imagine in your mind you've got 10 processes that you're always getting asked about by your agents, my thing would be, how do I tick those 10 things off to make sure that they never come to me again? And that's not because I don't want to do the job as a manager, it's because I want to make sure my team are empowered.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And to finish, Caroline said, have directors go through a reduced induction program to understand the challenges, then spend a day or a half day in the contact center taking calls. Definitely will see movement to improving practices. Unfortunately, we've reached the top of the hour, so I want to ask if you could write in the chat room in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about the webinar today? The winning tip is from Gavin, who said, we've trained our team with call handling techniques such as wallpaper effect, i.e. agents ignore previous contacts and don't make assumptions. Traffic light, i.e. green is a calm customer, red is emotional. It allows each interaction to be judged and handled on its own merit. We also introduced a knowledge base with decision trees and easy to understand /follow process maps. All this is followed up with regular coaching. So congratulations, Gavin. We'll be in touch after the webinar. A reminder, if you could complete the survey when you leave, it's only 4 questions long. The recording will be available later on this afternoon. I know lots of you like to share that with your leadership team. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to our 3 brilliant speakers. Peter, Massey, it's always brilliant to have you on these. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachel. Cheers.
Thank you. And to Lee Cottle, hopefully enjoyed your first webinar with us. Thank you for your insight.
Thanks, Rachel.
Brilliant. And thank you so much, Joe Hale. Great to have you back on our webinar programme.
Thanks, Rachel.
Brilliant. And thank you very much all, and have a good rest of the afternoon. Goodbye.
Cheers. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.